this is Masters 2. This is like the first ever international LAN tournament in the game. Surely you don't want the spotlight taken away with the new. Well, I mean, if you're marketing for right, you love that. You want to show this map up to the biggest audience that you can. I understand that. The whole thing makes sense, but part of me is just like, this is like historic.
Let's talk about Breeze because, well, first of all, obviously aesthetically it looks really pleasing. Quite often though, the maps that look really pleasing are kind of bad. But we should talk about this one because, you know, what I really liked is that everybody who was in VCT, I think, had the chance to get in and test this map, right? So a lot of people got to get in there. Guys, tell me a little bit about it. You know, I'm interested in some of the features maybe that exist in this map that aren't in others. What are your experiences so far in testing it?
So I think the main thing that people get wrong about maps like this is, you know, the question is, what's the gimmick? You know, with Bind, we have teleporters. With Haven, you've got free sites. I think since we've had Icebox, we've not really had gimmicks as such. Some people would point to the fact that there's like a laundry chute that you can sort of jump down.
They had Tonka trucks on Icebox. They changed the fucking A-side box into this little fucking thing that no one. It's like a pickup truck for ants.
It's the horizontal rappel. The horizontal rappel is the gimmick where you can fucking Indiana Jones across and just shoot people while you're fucking still on the rope.
Right. It's like a minor thing, but I think the difference between Breeze and the other map so far is that it is the most counter-strikey map in the sense of if you have a mid on this map, you cannot just let it go. If you look at maps like Bind, you can't look at because there is no mid. Haven doesn't really count. Split, impactful mid control, but that's because the whole map is about splitting, right? Hence the name.
Sure.
For something like Ascent, which is, I think a lot of people would define it as a really counter-strikey map, you can play a game of Ascent and not touch mid, and some teams will just not bother, right?
Immortals doesn't touch mid,
Yeah, exactly, right? This, because mid is so open and because there's so many ways that it connects to the A and B site, if you're defending, you need mid control. If you're attacking, you need to try and fight for mid as well. So it does play out very much like Cash, which is funny because, you know, Volcano's the one behind that map in Counter-Strike, and obviously is one of the main guys for Valorant 2. Mirage as well. It's those kind of ones where you really need to start pushing for that mid control. It's so open, it gets very deathmatchy. It's a hell of a lot of fun to play. It looks really good, but I still am not sure how it's going to go with the pro scene, right? They could play it a lot and then realize, oh, this is super defender-sided. This isn't fun, right? So we're still in the honeymoon period of the map.
Yeah. I didn't have a chance to test it yet. I've actually watched Ryan Central's video and then looked through about it and then tried to do a little bit of theory crafting about it too. And like Ryan said, it's super open. I think mid's open, A site's open. I've looked at Average Jonas's comments saying it's not really a map for Silva just because it's out in the open like that too. If you're trying to owl drone towards like the hallways, it's too tight as well. So now you're starting to see maybe a good map where an S-tier agent like Silva maybe is not going to be as important to be picked anymore on every single map. So it's going to be cool to see maybe a variety of the agents coming into the game right now. I do like the laundry chute. I think that's the gimmick right now because you fall into that, you cannot climb back up into it, and it kind of feels like that laundry chute or just that area itself. You know, in Star Wars at the beginning when they fall into the chute and then it just like the walls are closing. In the garbage chute?
Trash compactor, yes.
Yeah, exactly. It looks like that, actually. You get that feeling, too. It's pretty cool.
Interesting. So I have some elements. I mean, you could climb up the ladder on, like, Nuke and Train in Counter-Strike, but you probably wouldn't because getting up there takes too long if you're silent climbing the ladder, I guess. The concept of one-way, you know, a one-way portals, right, that we had on Bind is also interesting, right? You can only go sort of one direction. That also creates an inherent asymmetry on the map as well. So we have the patch notes, obviously, for the patch notes dropped today, and a couple things to mention alongside of Breeze being released. Less crucially, but more of an interesting nature, is that there'll be an unrated queue, which is only Breeze for a while, so people get to just practice this map, which is great. I think that's really good. Like a lot of people, you know, instead of getting Bind 4 times in a row, you know, people can, you know, jump straight into Breeze. But I think what the most interesting decision here, and it is interesting because it's maybe a little nuanced, is that they've announced that Breeze will be playable in Reykjavik, which is, by my reckoning, not that far away. So this, first of all, you've gone from 5 maps in the pool to 6.
Yes.
There's a new map veto and selection process that's going to now occur. So May 24th is the first time we could see Breeze.
Yep.
This is this is a pretty quick turnaround, right? I mean,
I mean, at the same time, though,
it's a month.
I know.
A month.
Yeah, exactly. It's a month minus a couple of days, and at the same time, there's been some pros that have had opinions about. Okay, it's maybe cool, but if I was a player, maybe not that cool about it. But if you're thinking about it, for Icebox, it came out like what, 2-3 a month before First Strike as well, because they wanted to have 5 maps into the veto process.
Okay, so that's fair. You feel like they rushed it in, right? So they could have 5 maps.
Yes. Now you look back at it, it's like, okay, they didn't necessarily need to rush it in. They could hold it until later if they have 7 maps. But at the same time, I think it's because also when you're looking at the 5 maps that are currently available, it might be stale already with the current maps that are being played. I know there's new agents that changes the way that the maps are being played right now for the compositions for teams. But I think just something fresh, something that's going to be like, hey, it's going to be our ace in the sleeve pick that's going to be able to upset some teams like Immortals tried to do, I think, versus Envy, that it didn't work out, right, when they picked Icebox on First Strike. Maybe you'll start seeing on Breeze as well. But I with the ban process, that's where it's going to get interesting, or the new veto process, because it's like what, potentially pick, ban, and then the last 2 maps is a coin toss, and that's going to be even more difficult for teams right now going into Masters 2, in my opinion.
Ryan, what do you think about this when it comes to competitive integrity, right? It is a month.
Yeah.
But in this case, like, there's no reason to rush a map into the map pool, because now you actually have a weird situation where you have a map pool where after banning and picking, there are 2 maps left over instead of the 1. So, like, you used to just be like the map that wasn't picked or banned ended up being the decider in a best of 3.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I'm not sure how it would work with 6 maps. Like, they seem pretty excited to show off their new system, which is probably one of the reasons why it's going to be played in Masters 2.
Yeah.
If this was like Masters 3 or a tournament next year, like an international LAN, I don't think I'd care. It's within the jurisdiction that Riot has set up, saying, oh, when we bring in a new map, teams will have like 4 weeks to play it before it'll go into tournament competitive play.
Mm-hmm.
But this is Masters 2. This is like the first ever international LAN tournament in the game. Surely you don't want the spotlight taken away with the new. Well, I mean, if you're marketing for Riot, you love that. You want to show this map up to the biggest
Sure.
audience that you can. I understand that. The whole thing makes sense, but part of me is just like, this is like historic, and no other games had this kind of thing before, where we've had such a prolonged international LAN because of obviously COVID, the pandemic, right? So I feel like we've waited this long. We have 5 maps that teams have had 6 months to practice. They've got their heads around Astra for the most part, which was even 2 months ago, which to me is crazy. Like, where has that time gone? I just feel like let the teams go into this on a fairly level playing field when it comes to the maps and the time that they've had to practice certain things. It's the reason why there's no agent balance is in this recent patch, because the devs don't want to go into Masters 2 in a volatile state of the meta. But that's what you're doing by throwing a new map in. I would have preferred it without. I understand why they've done it, and if this was like Masters 3 or an event in the future, it wouldn't bother me. But this being the first international event where you want to see North America, Europe, Korea all play together, you don't want it to be who can get their heads around Breeze and use it to exploit the games that they're playing, more so than who are just the better teams on the 5 maps currently in the game that have been there for that long.
It means what are you trying to evaluate here at Masters? Are you trying to evaluate the teams that are the most adaptable, or the teams that are most solid in terms of, you know, practicing what they know, those 5 maps? Because your criteria for assessment, you know, because obviously your assessment is playing these teams against each other. Your criteria for assessment actually changes somewhat now that you have that expectation of these teams sort of building this map into their pool. What do you think, Vance?
Well, I was trying to think about at the same time, like I see Launders that's tweeting out right now too, like how could they possibly think it's okay? And I'm trying to think back for like Counter-Strike, whenever they're rotating maps back into circulation. So for example, they take out Nuke, they're going to rework
It's an
Nuke.
active duty group is what they have, yes.
Yeah, so then once they bring it back in, how much time do the players actually have to be able to practice once it gets into like international LAN too? Because the LANs themselves for the CS:GO circuit follows its own thing. It's not following Valve. Valve is not following anything at all. They don't really fucking care. They're gonna pull out a map. They're gonna bring in a map. Whatever happens. So when Vertical came in, when Nuke came in, how much time did those players and those teams actually have to practice those maps? It was one of those. It was one of those maps that was insta banned for a lot of these teams, and then suddenly like Navi is gonna pick it, then Astralis is gonna pick it, and then you have Liquid that's gonna take it and become big, and they start becoming good on Nuke. It may happen that it's gonna be the same thing in Iceland for this map, but there's still the possibility there that some teams will want to take advantage of that and be that number one team right away on Breeze.
I was cast in ESL Pro League at the time that they brought Nuke back into the game. The thing is, though, is that they were predetermined maps that they were play on. I'm pretty well. Yeah, there were a lot of best of ones as well. It was quite a weird. It was a different format in the ESL Pro League.
Yeah.
We had some situations. It was fucked. Where like we would have NIP play heroic twice in a row on Nuke twice.
Yeah.
You know, just weird shit like that. But it was the case that like everyone would try and ban it or just avoid playing it, right? But this is going to force teams. I mean, okay, in fairness, this doesn't mean you have to learn how to play Breeze. This might mean that if you're face, you have to go back and start playing Haven again. You've been banning. So like, it just means that you do have to broaden your active map pool. But there is the question is there a limit to how broad your active map pool should be? Because it is a bandwidth stress.
I definitely think that there's going to be a certain advantage, of course. If you're looking at it from a mat's perspective, then okay, put it in. But if you're looking at from a player's perspective where they have to veto, where it could potentially be a disadvantage for the first seed or the second seed, because the first seed gets to pick or ban first, whatever the system's going to be. And then the second one is, their option is they could defer. So if they're going to defer it to a team and they're like, okay, well, we're going to ban this and we're going to ban this, there's a possibility that a higher seed still has a better advantage in terms of getting the best maps in the series against you, because you might have like two of your weakest maps in the series.
Right.
I think that's where an issue could happen.
I mean, that again, Riot said they're excited to debut their new selection process. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how it plays out. Obviously, it's important to note that, like, honestly, one of the major stakeholders in this situation are the actual players. Right? Yes. I don't consider the audience as consumers necessarily to be stakeholders in something like this, purely because, I mean, they stake their time. That's about it, but it's purely recreational. So there's always the question where it's like, whose interests are more important to cater to, the viewer or the player? And, you know, generally speaking, I err on the side of the player, just because that they actually have actual tangible investment tied up in this, and it can affect them. But we'll, so obviously pro players, not over the moon about it. You know, a lot of people say they hate Icebox, but I know a lot of coaches love it. For example, like Tailored and Psycho and stuff like that love Icebox, and they think it's a great map. So, you know, it's very interesting to see how perception differs between audience and player.
It just came out today, right? It just came out today, and yesterday it was like or you could actually queue in if you wanted to for anybody to participate in the VCTs. But I was going around all the streams and seeing if anybody was playing it, at least in North America, and everybody's just playing regular rank because they wanted to grind the battle pass anyways. So I think in terms of like trying out the new map, yeah, exactly. There was no interest of really trying to showcase that map. Even I was looking in the pro Discord. I don't think there was that many pickups that was being played on the new map yet. I think everybody's focusing on the NA regionals for those that are still in it. And then after that, then you start like theory crafting what's going to happen here with Breeze, where you don't really want to show anything yet. I think it's still going to be an opportunity for surprises for some of these teams that may choose Breeze going into Masters. The cool part about it, though, is that it's international LAN, so you can practice it all you want versus North America if you're here. But then if you're going to have to play against Vision Strikers, for example, who are like at the forefront of theory crafting the whole time, they might have an advantage going into the Masters too.
All right, so obviously, point brought up in chat saying sort of that the customer is always right. Yeah, I mean, in fairness, consumer and customer, I think we should identify the nuanced difference between the two here, because if this was pay-per-view, fine. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, y'all pay to
I mean,
watch this shit.
it's good marketing for the game, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
check out this new map that all the pros are playing. Like, that's probably one of the strongest reasons. But I do
But
think
if I
in
have a
that sense,
decision,
do a
if
show
I have a
match,
decision
you know?
that pits the competitive integrity of the game versus the satisfaction of like a, let's say, a layman or or maybe a sort of a viewer that does not have any material resources tied up in the competitive integrity of the game. Sorry, customer, but y'all can shut up and fucking watch Icebox.